The journey began in a town that looked like it had been slowly baked by the sun for about 500 years. Small mud brick homes leaned against each other like tired old men. Narrow streets twisted between market stalls covered with faded cloth. The air smelled of dust, warm bread, camel fur, and smoke from cooking fires that never fully went out. And above everything there was the desert, waiting, not rushing, not threatening, just sitting there beyond the edge of town like an ocean made entirely of sand. Most people in the town tried not to stare at it too long, because once you entered it, there was always a chance you would never come back. Our caravan gathered before sunrise, when the air was still cool enough to pretend the day might be kind. A few lanterns flickered near the well in the center of town. Camels groaned unhappily as bags were tied onto their backs. To be fair, camels always sounded unhappy. You could give a camel gold, fresh water, and a comfortable place to sleep, and it would still complain like someone asked it to pay taxes. The travelers moved slowly through the dim light. Some were traders carrying cloth, salt, and spices. One man carried tiny glass bottles wrapped carefully in wool. Another protected a bundle of letters sealed with wax. There was even a woman traveling with her young son, who looked far too excited about the whole thing. Children are sometimes the only people who see danger and think, wow, adventure. The adults knew better. Near the well stood the caravan leader, a man named Rahim. He was tall, thin, and sunburned in the way only desert guides could be. His face looked carved from old leather. Deep lines stretched beside his eyes from years of squinting into bright horizons. He checked ropes quietly while the others prepared. Rahim did not waste words. In the desert, people who talked too much usually became people who breathed sand. He had crossed this route many times before. At least that was the rumor. Nobody really knew how many journeys he had survived because Rahim answered questions the same way a stone wall answers questions. Mostly with silence. The town around them slowly woke up. Shopkeepers opened wooden shutters. Bakers carried fresh flatbread into the streets. Somewhere nearby, a donkey screamed like it had seen a ghost. A few early travelers hurried through the market, trying to finish business before the heat arrived. Because the heat always arrived. And when it did, everything slowed down. A soft wind moved through the streets, carrying tiny grains of sand with it. The desert was already reaching into town, little by little. It always did. Some travelers said deserts were alive. Not alive like animals, of course. More like something patient. Something that could wait forever. At the edge of the caravan, a young trader named Yusuf tightened the strap on his water skin for the third time in 10 minutes. He was nervous. Everyone could tell. "You'll wear a hole through it," another traveler told him. Yusuf stopped adjusting the strap immediately. Then he checked it one more time anyway. Nobody laughed. Most people were nervous too. A desert crossing was not a normal trip. It was not like walking to the next village or sailing along a coastline. Once you left the final town behind, there would be long stretches where nothing existed except rock, heat, and sand. No inns. No farms. No easy rescue. If something went wrong out there, the desert usually kept the secret. That was why travelers spent days preparing before departure. Water skins were patched carefully. Sandals were repaired over and over. Food was packed tightly against heat and insects. Every piece of cloth mattered. Even shade became valuable. Especially shade. A traveler once wrote that the shadow of a small rock in the desert could feel more precious than treasure. Honestly, after enough hours in the sun, even a slightly larger pebble probably looked luxurious. As dawn slowly spread across the horizon, the sky turned pale gold. The desert beyond the town began glowing softly in the early light. Endless dunes stretched outward like frozen waves. Beautiful from far away. Terrifying once you were inside them. Rahim finally climbed onto his camel. That was the signal. The caravan grew quiet. A few people exchanged quick goodbyes with family members standing nearby. One older woman pressed her forehead against her son's hand before stepping back into the crowd. A merchant handed his shop keys to his brother. Someone whispered a prayer under their breath. These moments were always short. Long goodbyes made desert journeys harder. Rahim looked back once at the group. "We leave now," he said. That was all. No speech. No dramatic inspiration. No promise that everyone would survive. Honestly, probably a good decision. The caravan began moving through the narrow streets. Camel bells rang softly in the morning air. Step by step, they passed the final homes at the edge of town. The last gardens disappeared behind them. The last palm trees faded into the distance. Soon even the sound of the marketplace vanished. Ahead of them was only open land. The desert floor at first was hard and rocky, scattered with dry bushes and cracked earth. But farther away, larger dunes waited beneath the rising sun. The travelers walked quietly. Some looked ahead, some looked back, because there is always a strange feeling when leaving the last safe place behind. Part of you wants to keep moving forward. Another part quietly wonders if turning around would be smarter. But for many people throughout history, turning around was not really an option. Some crossed deserts to trade. Some crossed to escape war. Some searched for work, food, or safety. Others traveled for faith, carrying hope across impossible distances because hope was sometimes the only thing they still owned. And that morning, as the final town slowly disappeared behind the blowing dust, our travelers carried very little besides that. And just enough water to make the journey seem possible. The first few days in the desert were almost pleasant. Almost. That is how the desert tricks people. In the mornings, the air still felt cool. The sand glowed softly under the sunrise, and long shadows stretched across the ground like dark rivers. From far away, the dunes looked smooth and peaceful. Beautiful even. A person seeing the desert for the first time might think, "This doesn't seem so bad." And that person would be making a terrible mistake. But early on, the caravan still had energy. The camels walked at a steady pace. People talked quietly while traveling. Someone even sang during the second morning until Rahim told him to save his strength. The singer looked slightly offended. Still, he stopped singing. The caravan moved in a long, slow line across rocky ground where patches of dry grass somehow survived. Small lizards darted between stones. Occasionally, a bird circled overhead, though nobody could explain what exactly the bird expected to find out there. Probably another lizard having a bad day. Rahim guided the group carefully. He traveled near the front with his eyes fixed on the horizon almost all the time. Sometimes he checked the sun. Sometimes the shape of distant hills. Sometimes the wind itself. Experienced desert guides learned to notice things other people ignored. A slightly different dune shape. A change in sand color. Tracks nearly erased by wind. Tiny clues could mean water or danger. Mostly danger. The travelers slowly fell into routine. And routine mattered in the desert. Without it, people became careless. Careless people usually became stories told around future campfires. They woke before sunrise each morning while the world was still cold and dark. Fires were kept small to save fuel. Breakfast was simple: flatbread, dates, maybe dried meat if someone felt generous. Water was measured carefully. Always carefully. Nobody drank as much as they wanted. That lesson arrived fast. By midday, the heat became too strong for long travel. The sun hung overhead like a giant angry lantern. Even breathing felt warmer. So the caravan rested during the hottest hours. Travelers gathered beside rocks or small cloth shelters for shade. Camels folded themselves onto the ground with loud groaning noises, sounding deeply disappointed by life in general. Honestly, the camels had a point. Yusuf learned very quickly that desert heat was different from normal heat. This was not the kind of warmth people enjoyed near a river or during summer markets. This heat felt personal. It wrapped around your body and pressed against your chest. It dried sweat before it could cool skin. Lips cracked, eyes burned. Even metal became too hot to touch for long. And yet somehow, Rahim looked completely normal. The man barely sweated. Yusuf began suspecting that Rahim might actually be part desert spirit, or possibly made entirely from old rope and sand. On the third day, Yusuf finally asked him a question while they walked. "How do you know where we're going?" Rahim kept staring ahead. "I remember." "That's it?" "Yes." Yusuf waited for more explanation. None came. The desert guide walked silently onward. Yusuf frowned. That answer felt illegal somehow. Still, memory really was how many guides survived. Long before modern maps, travelers crossed deserts using memory passed down through generations. Wells were remembered. Dangerous areas were remembered. Rock formations became landmarks. Stars became roads. A good guide carried the desert inside his head. A bad guide usually disappeared into it. By evening, the temperature changed again. That surprised many of the newer travelers most of all. Deserts were supposed to be hot. But after sunset, cold air spread quickly across the dunes. Wind rolled through the open land, and travelers wrapped themselves in heavy cloth while sitting around small fires. The stars above them looked endless. Without cities or smoke, the night sky became brighter than most people had ever seen. Thousands of stars covered the darkness from horizon to horizon. The young boy traveling with his mother stared upward every night with wide eyes. "It looks close," he whispered once. It did. Out there, the sky felt so large and clear that it almost seemed low enough to touch. Some travelers quietly shared stories during those nights. Old trade rumors, memories from home, strange tales about cities beyond the desert. One man claimed he once saw a scorpion large enough to kill a camel. Nobody believed him, not even slightly. Still, the story became more dramatic every night. By the fifth day, the caravan reached larger dunes. The rocky ground slowly vanished behind them. Now there was only sand. Endless sand. The dunes rose like golden waves frozen in time. Wind moved across their surfaces in soft ripples. Walking became harder because feet sank slightly with every step. The camels handled it better than the humans. Of course they did. Camels always looked annoyingly prepared for desert life. Long eyelashes against sand. Wide feet for walking dunes. Ability to survive with less water. Meanwhile, humans entered the desert carrying cloth bags and confidence. Not ideal. The farther they traveled, the quieter the caravan became. Conversation faded. People focused more on breathing, walking, and conserving energy. Even simple tasks began feeling heavier. A traveler could spend hours staring at the same distant dune without seeming to get any closer. That was another desert trick. Distance became strange out there. The clear air fooled the eyes. Mountains that looked nearby might actually take 2 days to reach. Shadows changed shape constantly. The horizon never seemed to move. More than once, Yusuf thought they must surely be near the next resting point. And more than once, Rahim calmly informed him they still had many hours left. Yusuf stopped asking after a while. That evening, the wind picked up slightly as camp was prepared beside a tall dune. Sand drifted softly through the air while the travelers settled down for the night. The young boy asked his mother when they would reach the other side of the desert. She smiled tiredly. "Soon," she said. Rahim overheard this while tying supplies beside his camel. For the first time in days, he almost smiled. Because everyone in the desert said, "Soon." Soon for water. Soon for rest. Soon for safety. But the desert had its own idea of time. And it was never in a hurry.